Hey everyone, Tank and Sign here. Today's video I'll give you a quick but thorough explanation of volumetric shells, a feature released in the Raining Fire patch. This is an extremely important change to the game and very much changes how ground forces are played. Additionally, both air and naval forces are being affected too, although to a lesser extent. That said, I'll try to make this quick, so let's get into it. So, to start, volumetric shells are essentially shells that have been given real-life dimensions. Before volumetric shells, shells used to be simulated as quote-unquote material dots. Put simply, they used to be simulated as being no larger than a .50 caliber round, regardless of if the shell that was fired was 20 millimeters or even 183 millimeters. They were all treated as being the same size. Not the same power, of course, but the same physical dimensions. Giving shells volume makes shells their appropriate size. No longer can you pixel hunt and shoot a 1 or 2 pixel wide gap with a 90mm cannon and expect a guaranteed penetration. The area you hit must now be clear of surrounding armor that is at least equal to the width of the shell that you're firing for your shell to hit that spot alone. An example of this is if you shoot the turret ring of a well-armored vehicle, such as the IS-3 from the front. Before, with sufficient power, you'd be able to pen it equally with all size shells due to the turret ring being incredibly lightly armored compared to the rest of the front of the vehicle. Now, you must pass through all of the armor surrounding where the shell hits. So as you can see here, it looks pretty well armored, but if you look here, you have the turret ring, and you used to be able to shoot literally right here with any sized round if it had sufficient penetration, and you'd just be able to blow it sky high. It would be a really easy shot. So you can see it's only about 20 millimeters of protection, but you're going to have a shell that's bigger than the space between the turret casing and the hull, so it's just no longer going to work out that way. So if you have a 90mm shell, you need to shoot through the entirety of the armor surrounding where the shell impacts, rather than just the tiny point where it makes initial contact, as it used to do. Simply put, you can't shoot through a 1 or 2 millimeter wide junction where two separate armor plates meet. Now you must be able to shoot through the entirety of the armor rather than be given essentially a free kill on a lucky shot. An example of this is with the Jumbo Sherman, as there used to be a noticeable weakness where the two frontal plates were riveted together, as you can see here in an old weak spot video of mine. With volumetric shells, kills like this are simply no longer possible. Interestingly, this also affects MG ports and driver vision slits, as many shells are larger than these weak spots, meaning that the shell must now force itself through the typically thicker armor at the sides of these weak points in order to get a kill. So not every single weak spot, not every single MG port is going to be affected by this. For example, this is still a pretty glaring weak spot, but this is a very wide one. On tanks like the Tiger and other ones like that where it has a very thin driver's vision slit, your typical shells will not go through, not even 20mm shells will be able to pierce it. Now, some spots that are low profile, such as the cupola on the Panther II, were difficult to penetrate because of how low they sit, which caused many ricochets. As you can see here, they still will cause ricochets, but you can shoot through it and possibly cause quite a bit of damage on the interior. Now, because shells are physically larger, they'll be able to dig in and penetrate similar cupolas much more often. This means that bulged armor is now more vulnerable. And it should also mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, that tanks like the Stridsvagn 103 with its ultra sleek wedge design are now slightly more likely to be penned if you hit a small spot of raised armor on an otherwise flat, angular surface. And for the final major effect of volumetric shells on tanks, and something many of you have noticed, you can destroy or damage enemy cannons simply by shooting close enough to them, rather than scoring a direct hit against them with the tip of your shell, being that shells are now much larger and, as such, can graze vehicles and vehicle components now without actually hitting them directly. Finally, the effects on planes and ships are quite a bit less, but they still exist. In much the same way as I just mentioned with shell grazing, volumetric shells allow you to shoot close enough to a plane or ship to cause damage, especially in regards to planes, as they are much more fragile. If you have a larger caliber aircraft weapon, expect a little more damage to come from your shells. They won't cause more damage per round, but will be very slightly more likely to hit or graze an aircraft, thus giving you a tiny bit higher chance to cause damage. In summation, for tanks, volumetric shells are, in large part, allowing for tank armor to actually protect tanks the way the armor was designed, rather than allowing for a 120mm shell to go through a 5mm space in the armor that was specifically designed to be there by tank designers. Simply put, armor is now more effective throughout almost all of ground forces, and tanks going tank. This said, tell me what you guys think. Do you like volumetric rounds? I feel like it is one of the best and most important features to come to War Thunder in the 7+ years I played this game. Leave your comments below for how you feel about it. If you haven't already, please subscribe as it means the world to me. That said, this is Tankenstein and I'm signing out. Thanks again for watching, guys, and be excellent to each other. Take care, everyone.